I've been working at this gas station for about 2 years now. It's located on the outskirts of the city, about a 20-minute drive from downtown. The station is called Gulf Station, and it sits along an old, mostly abandoned highway. At night, the whole area around it is pitch black, with hardly any cars passing by. The streetlights on either side of the road are mostly broken, casting long stretches of darkness over the place. I work the night shift from 10 p.m. until 6 a.m., and usually, I'm the only one there. I took this job out of necessity. Money's tight at home, and my parents' health hasn't been great. I've been juggling 2 jobs to make ends meet. During the day, I work at a delivery company, and at night, I come to this gas station. Sure, the night shift can get boring and a bit eerie at times, but it's mostly quiet, which gives me time to read or watch shows on my phone. It was just another Friday night, nothing out of the ordinary. Like usual, I ate dinner, changed into my uniform, and got to the station right on time. Honestly, I've gotten used to the monotony of this job, especially late at night when there are barely any customers. The station is isolated, with no nearby stores or houses, just an industrial area far off in the distance. But even that place is quiet at night, except for the occasional truck passing through. Otherwise, the whole area feels dead. Around 1:30 a.m., the stillness of the night was suddenly interrupted by a soft tapping noise. I was sitting behind the counter, going through some paperwork. I had my headphones in, listening to some music. So at first, I thought the noise was just part of the song. But the tapping continued, steady, rhythmic, like someone was lightly knocking on the glass. I took off my headphones and everything fell silent. The noise seemed to be coming from outside the gas station. I stood up, walked over to the glass doors, and looked outside. Everything was exactly as it should be. The empty lot, the gas pump standing quietly under the dim lights, and the road stretching off into the dark. There wasn't a single soul in sight. I shrugged it off, thinking it must have been the wind. This road often gets gusty at night, which can make all kinds of strange noises. Telling myself not to overthink it, I went back to the counter to finish my work. But about 10 minutes later, the tapping returned. This time, it was louder, as if someone or something was knocking more forcefully. My heart started to race. I looked up at the glass doors again, but there was still nothing there. I was starting to feel uneasy, wondering if my imagination was playing tricks on me. Then, something happened that made me realize it wasn't just my mind. I heard a faint clattering noise from inside the store, like something had fallen off a shelf. The sound was coming from one of the aisles. I glanced at the security monitor, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Still, I got up and walked over to check it out. As I approached the shelves, I saw a row of soda bottles on the floor, as if they had been knocked over. My heart skipped a beat. I crouched down, picked them up, and checked the shelves. Everything seemed stable, and there was no one around. The whole situation felt off. I started to feel a strange heaviness in the air, like something was watching me. I hurried back to the counter, a cold unease creeping up my spine. I was just about to grab my phone and call for help when, out of nowhere, a blood-curdling scream shattered the silence. It was so loud, so shrill, that it nearly made me jump out of my skin. I rushed to the door, looking outside in a panic. I caught a glimpse of a pair of red taillights disappearing down the road. But the scream, it didn't sound like it came from a passing car. It was twisted, almost inhuman, like something out of a nightmare. I stood there frozen, staring down the empty road, trying to process what I'd just heard. My rational mind told me it was probably just some drunk or a crazy person, but the sound had unsettled me in a way I couldn't shake. It wasn't normal. As I turned back toward the counter, my phone buzzed. I pulled it out to check and saw a new text message from an unknown number. It simply read, "Did you hear it?" My stomach dropped. I had no idea who would be texting me, let alone asking about what I had just heard. No one knew I was here, and no one could have possibly known about the scream. My hands started trembling as I stared at the screen. I tried calling the number, but the call didn't go through. Instead, all I got was a robotic voice telling me the number was unavailable. A wave of fear washed over me. I quickly tried to dial 911, but as soon as I hit the call button, my phone screen flashed no signal. That had never happened before at the station. I'd always had full service here. Just then I glanced at the security monitor again. This time I saw movement. A shadowy figure was standing just outside the station, barely visible under the dim light. They were completely still, just standing there, facing the entrance, as if they were waiting for something or someone. My heart pounded in my chest. I couldn't make out their face, it was too dark. For a few seconds I didn't move, staring at the monitor, hoping I was imagining things. But the figure remained. They didn't move, didn't come closer, just stood there, watching. Then, as suddenly as they had appeared, the figure began to slowly fade back into the darkness, moving out of sight from the camera. I bolted toward the back door, looking through the small window into the lot behind the station. Nothing. Everything was quiet again, except for the low hum of the gas pumps and the distant rustling of the wind. I didn't calm down until my shift ended at dawn. I told my coworkers about the strange events, but they just laughed it off, saying I was probably tired or imagining things. But I know what I heard, and I know what I saw. The scream, the text, the shadowy figure, I still can't explain it. Now, every time I work the night shift, I can't help but glance nervously at the doors, half expecting to hear that awful scream again, or see that shadowy figure standing just outside, watching. I work the night shift at a 24-hour convenience store. The job isn't too demanding, and besides the occasional drunk coming in to buy cigarettes, we rarely get any customers during the late-night hours. That night, the weather was freezing cold, with light snow falling outside, making the store feel even more desolate. After midnight, the streets were empty, with only the occasional car passing by, casting brief flashes of light through the windows. Around 2 a.m., I was standing behind the counter, mindlessly scrolling through my phone since there were no customers. The store was silent, and the warmth from the heater made everything feel a little too still. Suddenly, I heard a faint banging noise coming from the back, where the storeroom was located. It sounded like something, or someone, was knocking gently against the metal door that led out to the alley. The storeroom door was heavy, metal, and securely locked. It was rarely used except for deliveries. At first, I thought it might just be the wind blowing something against the door, especially with the snow and cold outside. I walked over to check, pushing against the lock to make sure it was secure. Everything seemed fine, but I decided to open the door slightly and peek outside. The alley was empty, just some trash bags and a layer of freshly fallen snow. I shut the door quickly, not wanting to let the cold air in, and returned to the counter. Not long after I sat down again, the noise started up once more. This time, the banging was clearer and heavier, as if someone was deliberately trying to get my attention. My heart started to race a little as I stared toward the back of the store. It didn't make sense. Who would be out there at this time of night, especially in the freezing weather? I stood up again, trying to keep calm, and slowly walked toward the back door. This time, as I approached, the banging stopped, but I heard a new sound: scraping. Something sharp was dragging slowly across the metal door from the outside. The noise was faint but distinct, and it sent a shiver down my spine. I paused with my hand just inches from the door, listening carefully. The scraping continued, long and deliberate, right on the other side. I leaned in closer, pressing my ear to the cold metal, and I could hear faint breathing, low and steady, right on the other side of the door. My heart pounded in my chest. I froze, unsure of what to do. A dozen thoughts ran through my mind. Was someone trying to break in? Was it a prank? A homeless person looking for shelter from the cold? Just as I was about to back away and call the police, the scraping and breathing stopped. The store fell silent once again, almost eerily so. I stood there for a moment, trying to make sense of it, but everything was still. I hurried back to the counter and pulled up the surveillance footage from the cameras. The feed showed the back alley clearly, illuminated by the dim glow of a streetlight. There was no one there, and nothing seemed out of place. I watched the screen intently, waiting to catch something, but the alley remained empty. I exhaled slowly, trying to convince myself it was just the wind or maybe some animal that had wandered too close. But as I sat there, nerves still on edge, I heard another sound. This time, it was coming from above. The roof. It was a soft, dragging noise, like something heavy being dragged across the ceiling. I looked up at the ceiling tiles, listening closely. The sound grew louder, slow and deliberate, almost like footsteps. The roof wasn't particularly high, and it wasn't the kind of place where anyone would be walking around at night. So who or what was up there? Panic started to set in. Was someone trying to get in through the roof? I knew the store had an access ladder that led to the rooftop. Grabbing the store keys, I cautiously made my way to the back of the store, where the ladder was. My hands were trembling as I unlocked the door to the rooftop stairs. Pushing open the heavy metal door to the roof, I was immediately hit with the icy cold air. The rooftop was covered in a thin layer of snow, the only light coming from a few distant streetlights. I scanned the area, but it was completely empty. There was no sign of anyone, no footprints in the snow, no sign of movement at all. The silence was oppressive, and the cold air seemed to bite into my skin. I took a few steps forward, looking around, but everything seemed normal. Maybe it was just my imagination, I thought, or perhaps the snow slipping off the roof had made those sounds. I turned to head back inside, but just as I reached the door, I heard it again. Footsteps. This time, they were coming from inside the store. I froze in place, my hand still on the doorknob. Someone was inside. I rushed back down the ladder, heart pounding in my chest. As soon as I got to the bottom, I heard the footsteps running through the store, fast and erratic. It sounded like someone was darting from the counter to the storage area, moving quickly but purposefully. I flung open the door and sprinted back into the main area of the store, but when I arrived, it was completely empty. The shelves were undisturbed, and everything seemed exactly as I had left it. I quickly checked the surveillance footage again, but the cameras showed nothing. No movement, no one entering or leaving the store. The rest of the night, I stayed behind the counter, heart pounding, waiting for something else to happen, but the store remained deathly quiet. When the sun finally rose, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. That was the last night I ever worked the night shift alone. Even now, I can't shake the feeling that something or someone was in that store with me, watching, waiting, just out of sight. I work as a night shift nurse at a small clinic. The clinic is located on a deserted road outside the city, and we rarely get any patients at night, especially in the dead of winter. The stillness of the place always made it feel a bit unsettling. That night was no different. There was only one patient in the entire clinic, a man who had been admitted after a minor car accident. He was unconscious, breathing steadily in one of the rooms. The entire clinic was silent, and I sat at the nurse's station, idly browsing through my computer to pass the time. Around 3 a.m., the only sounds I could hear were the occasional hum of the air conditioner and the ticking of the clock. Then, out of nowhere, I heard faint footsteps coming from the end of the hallway, as if someone was slowly approaching the nurse's station. At first, I didn't think much of it, assuming the patient might have woken up and needed help. But when I looked up to check, the hallway was completely empty. I frowned, slightly confused, but I could still hear the sound of those footsteps, light and deliberate, steadily growing louder, as though someone was walking toward me. My pulse quickened a little, and I got up from my chair, leaning out of the nurse's station to peer down the hallway. It was brightly lit, with white walls and floors, but completely devoid of any movement. There wasn't a single person in sight. Telling myself it was probably just my imagination playing tricks on me, I tried to shake off the feeling of unease and returned to my seat. But then the footsteps stopped. The sudden silence was even more unnerving. My heart started pounding, and a strange sense of foreboding washed over me. I decided to check on the patient, just to be sure everything was okay. I walked down the hallway toward his room, my shoes squeaking on the polished floor. The door to his room was slightly ajar, and the dim yellow light from inside spilled out into the corridor. I gently pushed the door open and stepped inside. The patient was still fast asleep, breathing softly. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. I let out a small sigh of relief and turned to leave. But as I reached for the door handle, I felt a cold draft, as if a breeze was seeping through the cracks in the door. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw something, At the far end of the hallway, a dark figure standing still. It was barely visible, cloaked in shadow, but unmistakably human-shaped. My breath caught in my throat. The figure didn't move, but I could feel it watching me. I took a hesitant step forward, trying to get a clearer look, but before I could approach, the figure suddenly slipped out of view, disappearing around the corner. I froze, my heart racing. I knew there was no way anyone could have gone around that corner, because there was no exit, just a dead end. My hands were trembling as I slowly backed away and hurried back to the nurse's station. Frantically, I pulled up the surveillance footage, desperate to make sense of what I had just seen. I replayed the footage of the hallway over and over, but the screen showed nothing. There was no sign of any figure, no movement at all. The hallway had been completely empty the entire time. I checked the timestamp. It perfectly matched the moment when I saw the shadow, but according to the camera, nothing was there. A cold sweat broke out on my forehead as I stared at the screen, trying to make sense of what I had just experienced. My logical mind was telling me it couldn't have happened, that maybe I was just tired, that I was imagining things. But deep down, I knew what I saw. As I sat there, trying to calm myself down, a new sound suddenly broke the silence. This time, it was coming from the clinic's front door. The faint, unmistakable sound of the door handle being slowly turned, as if someone was trying to enter. My pulse quickened again. The clinic was locked for the night, and no one should have been able to come in. I stared at the door, my breath shallow, waiting for the sound to stop. The door handle continued to rattle softly before falling silent again. The silence that followed was suffocating, thick with tension. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to run, to get out of the clinic as fast as I could. I quickly gathered my things and made my way to the back exit. My footsteps were fast but cautious, every creak of the floorboards echoing in the empty clinic. When I reached the back door, I unlocked it and cautiously peered outside. The cold night air hit my face as I stepped out, looking around to make sure no one was there. The parking lot was empty, just as it should be. I hurried to my car, heart still racing, and as I got in and locked the doors, I couldn't resist one last glance at the clinic. Everything appeared normal from the outside, the windows dark, the doors closed, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone had been watching me all night. I never worked another night shift alone after that. The footsteps, the shadowy figure, and the sound of the door handle turning, it all stayed with me long after that night. I still don't know who or what was in the clinic with me. Even now, when I think back on that night, a cold chill runs down my spine. That's today's story. If you enjoyed it, please like, subscribe to my channel, and turn on the notification bell. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.